requirements, aka the software that you'll need to, follow this tutorial. First, the Sims 4 Studio. This one allows you to create .package files, which are really files that will go into your game. Second, and the most relevant for this tutorial, is Blender. Blender is the software that will allow you to create 3D meshes. Download links for all these programs, as always, will be in the description below. If at any time you encounter an issue, or there is something that you don't necessarily understand, or it's not working out for you, please feel free to leave a comment. I always try to reply to as much questions as I possibly can. Open the Sims 4 Studio. Now, shelves are objects in The Sims 4. So right here under Object, we're going to select Create 3D Mesh. Once you have that selected, click this button that says Object. Now you'll be brought to this catalog. Now in the search bar, I'm just going to search for the shelf. I wanted to edit this shelf, so I want to select it by simply clicking on it and then click Next. Right now, we're saving our package file that will go into our game. All .package files should go to your mods folder. Even if you don't save it to your mods folder during this step, you'll eventually have to move it there in order for it to work in the game. Now, after you've done that, this is where you'll be brought to. As this is a mesh tutorial, we're going to select Meshes. So click Meshes. As you can see, we have different LOD options here. LOD stands for level of detail. So this mesh has 3 different levels of detail: high, medium, and low. Now, when making your own mesh, the best option for me is to go with the lowest level of detail, or LOD, simply because I don't want to complicate my life, and the lowest LOD will work perfectly fine with both medium and high LOD. So, select lowest possible level of detail on your object. Once you have it selected, click Export Mesh. What you're exporting and saving right now is that 3D model that we're going to edit. So you can save this file really wherever you want. And you can now open your Blender file. So I just double-clicked it, and this is what it looks like in Blender. If you've never used Blender before, the hardest thing about it really are just the controls and getting used to the controls. So this is what I'm kind of hoping to do with this tutorial, to show you the basics and the layout and just like some useful basic controls that will help you model your own mesh. How to move the objects would be the first thing. So on your mouse, press the middle button, the one that you scroll with. So hold that middle button and just try to move your object around. Right, so hold your middle button down and rotate. You can also zoom in and zoom out by just scrolling the middle button on your mouse, or you can also zoom in and zoom out by using your keyboard by pressing plus for zoom in and minus for zoom out. Once you've got a hold of that, I will briefly explain what your mesh contains. You can view all parts of your mesh right here at the top corner. Our whole thing, like together, is called scene. And under scene are all these like weird things like camera, different lamps, rig, different parts of our mesh. I'm going to select our third part. Go right here at the bottom and switch from object mode to edit mode. When you switch to edit mode, you can see all these black lines appear. These are lines that show really the structure of our mesh, and we're going to manipulate our mesh based on these black lines. First, selecting. You can try and press A on your keyboard. What this does is really select the entire mesh. You can deselect everything by pressing A again. If you want to select separate, like different parts of your mesh, you're going to do it by pressing L on your keyboard while hovering over the area you want selected. So I hover over this area and then I press L, so it is going to select this particular part for me. Now the reason why it selected this particular part for me, aside from the fact that I hovered over it, is because I'm currently selecting based on something called verticals. Right here at the bottom, you can choose by which part of your structure you want to select. Like, this is just some basic geometry, so you can select by verticals, edge, and face. My favorite way of selecting is face. I find it the easiest, and I would recommend using that option for all beginners, really. So choose select by face. I was thinking, I want this shelf to be empty. So I want to get rid of all these knickknacks, these tiny objects. So the first thing that I'm gonna do, I'm going to delete one tiny object at a time, starting with this stack of papers. Now, in order to delete objects in Blender, we first need to select them, obviously. So again, hover over the part that you want to select and press the letter L on your keyboard. And just go ahead and select all parts of the object that you want deleted. Rotate, zoom in, zoom out if needed. Once you have it selected, in order to delete it, press X on your keyboard and this menu will pop up. Here you can choose which part you want to delete. We're going to select verticals, so click verticals. And the stack of papers is gone. Next thing that I'm going to delete is this little bottle. So again, hover over the part you want deleted and press L on your keyboard to select it. This is a really tiny object, so I'm doing some zooming in, zooming out, rotating to select it all. Once I got it all, I will press X on my keyboard and then select verticals. I will repeat the exact same process for this little trophy thingy, selecting it all by hovering over the part I want selected and pressing L. Now once I have it all selected, to delete it, press X on your keyboard and select verticals. Now for the vase. Same thing, except that with this one, I missed some parts of the object during my initial selecting process. And this is kind of what it looks like when you don't select everything. In reality, this really isn't a big deal. These are just parts of the object that I missed and I didn't delete. But I can always go back and delete them the same way that I deleted everything else. So once again, hover over the part you want to select, press L, repeat until you get everything selected, press X and choose verticals. And it's gone. Now the last tiny decorative piece that I want off this shelf is this box with papers inside. So again, repeat the same thing. Hover over the part you want to select, press L, repeat until you have it all selected, and once it's all selected, press X on your keyboard and select verticals. As you can see, I missed some parts here as well, so I'm just finishing up. And there you have it, an empty shelf. What I wanted to do is that I wanted to add an extra shelf. As you can see here, there is an extra shelf. The way that we're going to do that is to simply copy and paste it. So, while in edit mode, select the shelf by hovering over it and pressing L until you have an entire shelf selected. Once you have it selected, go to the menu and click Duplicate. Now, as you can see, it sort of kind of like sticks to your mouse when you paste it. Well, whenever this happens to you, you can simply press Escape on your keyboard. This will automatically place your shelf at its original spot, which for me is here because this is the shelf that I've copied. So it's exact replica down to its position. Now you can move it by using these little arrows that you see while the object is selected. You can move it up and down on the Y axis by moving the blue arrow. You can move it sideways by using the red arrow. And you can move it backwards and forward by using the green arrow. Now I want it up, so I'm using the blue arrow. I'm just pulling it up with my mouse. And now we have an extra shelf. Now you see these little white thingies? Now in the game, these are actually glass, or well, they show up as glass, sort of like glass on top of a shelf. Now I like them, so I don't want to delete them, but they are kind of in a way, as you may have noticed. So if you're ever in the situation where a part of your mesh is kind of in a way, you can simply hide it. You can hide any part of your mesh by clicking the eye icon next to the part you want hidden. So I click the eye icon, and as you can see, the glass part of the mesh is now gone. I don't like how these shelves are positioned. Now I want there to be somewhat of an even amount of space between them, so I'm going to move them a bit. Selecting them by hovering over them and pressing L on your keyboard, and then moving them up and down by using the blue arrow. I'm just repeating it until I got everything done. Okay, so right now I'm going to position the glass part of the mesh as well. So I will make the glass part of the mesh visible again by clicking the eye icon and then selecting each glass part of the shelf and moving it down until I have it exactly where I want to. Again, using the blue arrow to do this. Now, finally, let's make it bigger. First, I'm going to move legs, just to define the length that I want my shelf to be. So I'm selecting both legs on the left side, so that I can drag them to the position where I want them to be. So select the legs of the shelf by hovering over the part you want selected and press L on your keyboard. Make sure you have everything selected because you don't want any pieces left behind. It can be very annoying trying to get them to their position like separately, so really make sure that you select all. Now once I have shelf legs selected, I'm just going to drag them sideways using the red arrow. And I want them kind of right here. Once I have that done, it's time to make my shelves longer. I want all these shelves to stretch from this leg of the shelf to this leg of the shelf, so that all of them are going to be the exact same size. I'm just going to hide the glass part again, just so that I can see the mesh that I'm editing a little bit better. So I can select all of them by again pressing L on my keyboard while hovering over them. Again, make sure you select everything. I cannot stress enough how important it is that you select everything. So, rotate, look up, look down. Just make sure you select everything because it can be really annoying if you have some leftover pieces and you're trying to position them at the right spot. It's a mess. So make sure you select everything on your first try. Once you have all shelves selected, right here at the menu, you can either select scale or you can also press S on your keyboard. Both of these commands really do the same thing, which is they activate the scaling option. And once you either select scale at the menu or you press S on your keyboard, something like this will happen. So it automatically starts resizing the whole selected area. But you can also choose if you want to scale it on X, Y, or Z axis. So what I want to do is that I want to scale it sideways. So that will be on the X axis. So I'm going to press X on my keyboard and then I will get to something like this. Right? So I'm resizing it sideways. Now once I get my size exactly the way that I want to, I'm just going to move my shelves to fit nicely between the legs of the shelf. Well, that came out a bit wrong, but you know what I mean. Now when I have this done, what I have to do is that I have to resize the rest of the mesh, like these glass shelf thingies. So I click on them and I'm resizing all of them so I can safely select all. So what this means is that you don't have to go and select each vertical separately by pressing L on your keyboard, but instead you can select all, so everything at the same time. And the way that you do that is that you simply press A on your keyboard. So when you press A on your keyboard, it automatically selects the whole mesh or that part of the mesh. Once everything is selected, press S on your keyboard for scaling and then X, because again I'm scaling it on the X axis, which is sideways, and get them to exactly where you want them to be. to be fair, this mesh already looks pretty cool, right? Except this bottom part. So like this white base and the shadow, they both need to be fixed. So click this shadow part of the mesh. Then select these two by hovering over them and pressing L on your keyboard. And then you can move them using the red arrow until they're underneath the shelf. Now for the white base part, you can simply click A to select all of it. Then either click Scale on the menu or select S on your keyboard. After that, press X on your keyboard to resize it sideways. Get it to the size you want it to be and drag it by using the red arrow to get it to position you want it to be. And finito! The mesh is done! So I'm just going to save it. Now go back to the Sims 4 Studio and import your mesh. Make sure that you import your mesh to all LODs. Again, LOD stands for level of detail. So import your mesh to low level of detail, medium level of detail, and high level of detail. And your shelf is done. And right here, choose Rig/Slots tab. Now, to add a new slot, you simply click the button that says Add. As you can see, this new line shows up. Once you click on it, you've got several empty bars show up, like name, parent, X, Y, and Z. First, name. Now, this isn't just a regular name, so don't name it like Jennifer or something. You can actually name it only 3 different things for this tutorial. And these names will be based on the size of the slot. First name is Deco SML1. And you're going to use that name if you want to create a slot space for a small object. Second name that you can use is Deco MED1. You will use that name if you want to create a slot for a medium-sized object. And last but not least is Deco LRG1. You will use that name if you want to add a slot space for a large object. I'm going to put these names in the description below so that you don't have to type it in constantly, but you can just copy and paste it from this video description box. Alright, so let's place the first slot down. First, I pasted a name for the small object in the name line. Now this is where my slot's place is. You see this little purple thingy? This is the default position where it automatically places it. The position is defined by X, Y, and Z, so if everything is 0, it's just going to be at 0 point, which is here in the middle. Now, the position that I want to be super accurate is Z position, because Z position represents going up and down. And if, for example, I push it too far up, it might float on the shelf, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use Blender to help me out to find the exact Z number. Alternatively, if you don't have Blender, or you don't want to get Blender, or you just don't want to work in Blender, you can just wing it with the numbers really until you get the exact position you want. What I'm going to do though is that I'm going to open my mesh in Blender, and now I'm going to look for the exact Z position. The way that I'm going to do that is that I'm going to select part of the shelf where I want my slot space to be. Right, so on this shelf, the slot space is going to be on this right here, this glass part. So select that part of the mesh by going into edit mode. Right, so while in edit mode, hover over the part you want selected and then press L on your keyboard. Right, so I have it selected now. And to get the exact number, I'm gonna go right here to the top and click plus. Then right here under transform, you're going to have the exact position of the selected part of the mesh for all three, so X, Y, and Z. Like I said, I just really need Z. So I'm going to copy that number. Then I'm going to go back to the Sims 4 Studio and paste it to the blank space next to the Z part. And there you have it. Our small slot space is done. Now I want to get a couple of other slot spaces on this shelf, but I really don't want to constantly click add and then pasting the Z number. So the easiest way to do it is to simply copy the slot that we just made. Right, so I click copy while I have our slot selected. And as you can see here, Sims 4 Studio automatically adds a new number. So that's super helpful. My slot is right here because our positions, they're exactly the same since we copied it. I'm very happy with my Z position, but what I do want to change is the X number. X number moves our slot left or right. So now I'm going to actually wing this one. So I'm just going to type in number 1 in the empty space next to the X. As you can see, even number 1 was kind of too high of a number for this shelf. So I'm going to need to put in a smaller number. I went with 0.5 and there it is. I want more slots for small objects on this top shelf. So I'm just going to copy my previous slot and change the number next to the X so that the objects will be stacked one next to another. And I'm just going to repeat that until I am happy with it. Okay, so what I want right now is that I want all slots that I just made on the top shelf to be exactly the same, but on the shelf underneath it. So I'm going to select all of them by holding Shift while selecting them, and then I'm going to copy them. After that, I'm going to need the exact Z position for my second shelf. So I'm going back to Blender. I'm selecting the second shelf and I'm copying the number. Go back to the Sims 4 Studio. Make sure all slots you just pasted are selected. Then I'm going to click Transform and paste the number from Blender next to the Z. What you're doing right now is that you are changing the Z position for all selected slots. Also make sure that Move is ticked. Once you have your number next to the Z and once you ticked Move, feel free to click OK. As you can see, all slots moved down. Now, this is pretty much the gist of it. The only thing that I'd still like to show you are medium and large slots. Everything is exactly the same except for the name. Once again, these are the names. They're also in the description below. Medium slot first. Again, click Add, paste the name for the medium slot, and do everything else the way we did it for the small slot. Define the Z number. As before, I'm getting mine from Blender. And then I'm changing the numbers for the X position. Exposition? Wow. Anyways, once I'm done with my medium slot, I'm going to do the exact same thing with the large slots. So again, the only thing that's different is the name. So define the Z numbers first. After that, I'm just changing the number next to the X. And you can define your slot's position through Blender if you want to be very accurate, or you can simply wing it. Right now, I'm just finishing up. Once done, don't forget to hit save. And side note, your CC should always be saved to your mods folder. Anyways, I hope you guys find these tutorials helpful. I must say I've gotten a very positive response from the Sims community about my CC tutorials. Now for my next video, I'm ditching the shelf and I'm moving on to the next thing. So what I was thinking is that we can make the object from scratch, like our own object. This is probably my most requested CC tutorial, like how to make your own object from scratch. And I have this idea for super basic furniture that's not at all hard to make, but it'll be super great for a tutorial. Any questions, requests, anything really is always welcomed in the comments below. I actually read my comments and I try to make videos based on what people ask for the most. You can always support me by liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Doesn't cost you anything, and to me it really means a lot. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.